We're live. Whoopee. Good evening, everybody. This is Julia Morgan, aka Morgan Scorpion, and I'm very delighted to introduce the American Werewolf in New Jersey. May I call you by your first name, American
Of
Werewolf?
course. Of course. Yeah, of course you can.
Otherwise known as Mike.
Hello. Hello,
So, Mike,
everybody. Hi, Julia.
to introduce yourself, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Sure. I have a channel now going on in its fourth year called An American Werewolf on YouTube, where we discuss and live stream horror. It's like one-stop shopping. You'll be talking about horror, sci-fi, action thrillers. We get into a little bit of sports. We're talking comic book movies, but in terms of sports, I'm talking like WWE wrestling and UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. So we do get into some MMA. But we're there and usually putting up some live streams of some relevant content. It's been there, and we're not going anywhere. So, yeah. That's where I am. YouTube,
Yeah.
you can find it on Spotify, Amazon, anywhere the podcasts are available. You'll find the show.
That is did we meet before? Yes, we did. We met on Twitter, if I remember right. Can you remember the post that we first met over? What movie were we talking about? Or
We weren't.
were we?
I wanted to interview you. I saw that you had a movie producer credit pertaining to horror, that you were a fan. I liked your profile shot. So I was like, she looks interesting. And I said, would you be interested in coming on, to talk horror, this, that, and the other? And you were like, yeah, sure. I could do that. And, I guess it went well because I think, we're probably coming up on almost 2 years now, with you being a regular on An American Werewolf, discussing, this horror here or that horror there. And, we've just kind of been, doing that ever since. Get out of here. Scoot.
Yes, because you actually got me started doing this. We were scheduled to do this thing on the second season of 30 Coins, which for some inexplicable reason you didn't want to do. And I was kind of disappointed. And then you suggested that I do my own, and my first reaction was, oh my God, I can't. And thought about it some more. I had some Cat Pulver, who was interviewed a couple of weeks ago, also
Yes.
came in. Because it took a while to get the courage to actually do it. What made you decide to start podcasting?
I haven't stopped. I mean, I knew that I wasn't necessarily the hugest fan of that second season. It was okay. The time constraints and what was going on, outside of, just in everyday life, were really pinching me. And I just kind of lost enthusiasm for that particular topic or episode. And I got out, I think, with about 2 weeks notice. But my suggestion was, you were the one that had this enthusiasm for this show, and it's not a bad show. On HBO, 30 Coins, this sort of cosmic horror series on their Spanish horror. And I was just like, if this is your passion, if this show, and especially that guy you're always stalking, Cosimo Fusco, I was like, well, you should be the one to run it, because this, then that authenticity comes from you, not necessarily for me, just because I have the, I can run StreamYard, so I see what we're doing now,
Yes.
and I'm happy for you, that, you're out here and you're live streaming and, you're just doing it, and that's all it is. You just take that first step and you keep on going.
That's what I'm intending to do, though I have to admit I do find myself bricking it before each time. Do you get any nerves before you start?
No, not at this point. Not at this point. It's become routine, and I remember that. When I first started doing it for a while, I had this sort of mask that hello, welcome to the show, and my name is blah blah blah, and this is my guest here today. Because initially, when I started, I wasn't even live streaming. I was uploading like
Mm.
Zoom conversations that I record Zoom conversations and then upload. Um, but once the live stream started, and eventually, I just I was relaxed, and now I don't even think about it anymore.
That is very reassuring to know, and for anybody who's watching or listening to this, why not give it a try? If you fall flat on your face, hardly anyone will see anyway. But
If
anyway,
you're
I'd like
doing
to
it,
know. Sorry?
go ahead. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I was wanting to ask where you grew up when you were a child. Were there any haunted houses in your neighborhood?
Um, there were some abandoned houses, haunted. No, I don't think so. And I remember exploring some of those haunted houses, and scaring the daylights out of yourself with your friends, that sort of thing. My understanding, maybe about 10 or 15 minutes down the road, there was one house that's supposed to be haunted, but it's still up there. I don't think it's haunted. I think, it's just some bad information that's circulating around.
Yeah.
Haunted houses, really. I grew up in North Jersey, so in New Jersey, so the northeastern part of America on the East Coast. Um, probably a couple of hours away from Long Island, where the whole
Mm,
DeFeo murders and the Amityville horror happened.
yeah.
A couple of hours away from that. So, when I was about 10 years old, that book got released, and then the movie. And that was a big deal because it was, New York, New Jersey, right on top of one, right on top of the other. That's fairly close. But um, the local mythology around here, and by that I mean probably within 15 minutes of where
Mm,
I am right now, is the Jersey Devil. I live very close to Leeds
mm,
Point, and so Mother Leeds' 13th child. That is the local boogeyman around here. But these days,
mm,
for one reason or another, you don't hear much about it. I remember going to elementary school, and I still remember
yeah.
this to this day. Uh, the teachers, for some reason, decided to show us the documentary or docu whatever on the Amityville
Mm,
Horror, and it's not the Amityville Horror, the Jersey Devil. It scared the daylights out of me. Scared
yes.
the daylights out of me because you're in the woods and it's dark, and you get
Mm,
these people talking about, they were walking down and they saw this thing, and they show like the shrubs shaking and these weird noises coming out from behind, and I was like, probably not even 10, and it just scared the daylights out of me. Scared the daylights out of me. But never saw the thing myself. Um,
mm.
so that's as far as my experience goes.
I'll just interject here with a little experience of my own. I grew up in a town called Exeter. So I was walking home from the pub one night by the riverbank, and I heard this grunting sound coming from the bushes, and I thought, you know. So I kind of walked on a bit, and the grunting sound came again because I was drunk and bolshy and a teenager. I'm like, "Oh, you trying to scare me like that? Come out here
Right.
and show yourself." Of course, nothing came out. So again, like I said, drunk. I charged into the bushes, ready to smack the living daylights out of whoever it was giving me a fright. And I saw two hedgehogs mating. That was the grunting sound. That's why they call them hogs. They
Uh,
sound like pigs. But
that's yeah, that does sound like a horror story, and you're very that was very rash. I mean, you could have been walking in on the Ripper. Yeah, okay, brave. But
yes,
when
well,
you're young,
like I
when
said,
you're young, those things don't occur to you. Those things don't occur to you. You are bulletproof.
well, yes, but also I heard that the best defense is a good offense. So I always thought, at the time, sounds like the
That's one
right
way to look
idea.
at it.
But do you believe in the Jersey Devil, or do you think maybe it's just a story to keep children out of the woods?
I don't think that there's something in there now. it's possible that something generated this kind of story, for so long. And you could go to the local bookstores and find, some local mythology, and books at Weird New Jersey and, that kind of stuff. You're always going to find different stories. Sure, why not? Not in a horror, I'm afraid to walk in the woods kind of way, but in a romantic, kind of, sure, why not? Why not? I don't claim to understand what it is, or anything like that, but yeah, sure. I think, it's funny because I don't know if you remember this, in the very first season of the X-Files, I think it might have been the third or the fifth episode, it was the Jersey Devil. And they were here in Atlantic City. Yeah. In the very first season of the X-Files, they covered the Jersey Devil, and it was it ended up, according to Chris Carter, in that story, it was a prehistoric family that had somehow remained undisturbed after all this time, because they were constantly building and developing around here. The old narrative, you start to cut down on the habitat. So that forces, the wildlife into, residential and commercial areas, searching and for foraging. But it was a fantastic episode. And I thought, if there was, if I didn't have a reason already not to love the X-Files, that in the very first season, they were right down on the Atlantic City Expressway, talking about the Jersey Devil. Then I was like, yeah, okay.
Were you a fan of the X-Files?
Oh, yeah, it's my all-time favorite show. I've got all 11 seasons right back here, if you can see it, and both movies and all 11 seasons right here. Both movies, the additional seasons that they did, those little mini seasons. Yeah, my all-time favorite show. I went to an X-Files convention once right before the first movie dropped at Javits Convention Center in New York City. I saw Gillian Anderson and a couple of other members from the cast. My all-time favorite show. I rewatch it in its entirety about every 5 years or so.
That's quite a lot of viewing time. It must take you a month.
It takes, I work it as, as I can, because you could watch you could sit down for 45 minutes and watch one episode, and then you get a little bug for it. And then maybe you put it down after a while, but then you come back to it because now with the streaming services, you can just leave it. And, that episode that you left it on is still there waiting for you when you come back a month later, and so you work it at your own convenience.
I always got really confused by the subplot about the Greys. To the life of me, did the Greys exist? Were they a government plot?
I think that they did, and yes, they were. But again, that's one of the great things about the streaming services now. I believe in physical media. You can see that behind me, but to just not have to worry about, wait, where was I a month ago or 3 weeks ago? It's right there waiting for me. I'm doing the same thing with the old horror series, Dark Shadows.
Yes. Yes.
Dark Shadows is on Tubi. There are 1,225 episodes. I have tons of seasons, digital copies here. But I'm not going to be able to sit down and watch 1,225 episodes, but one episode is a 30-minute thing. So minus commercials, it's 20 minutes. I can squeeze in 2 episodes here and 2 episodes there. And then, before I go to sleep or something like that. So I love that you can do that now.
I've never sat down to watch the whole series in its entirety. Just a few episodes here. I've got about 6 box sets of it. But I was introduced to it through the books by Marilyn Ross. So I read the Dark Shadows books long before I saw the show. What did you think of the remake? The one with Johnny Depp?
I think it had nothing to do with, the original series. It was okay. I don't even remember it really. I grew up watching Dark Shadows because when I came home after school on my local PBS affiliate, NJN, New Jersey Network, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there was this horror show about a vampire named Barnabas Collins. And, I was, I'm in high school then. I was, well hooked into horror, 10 years or so at that point. And so every day, I would just come home in 30 minutes, because I was one of those kids. I came home, when I got out of school. And
Yeah.
I wasn't a Doctor Who fan. I was a Dark Shadows fan. And
Yeah.
so I sat down and watched this show. Looking at it now, though, because by the time I got into it, they were in the past, like in colonial times. Looking back at it, I didn't realize how evil Barnabas Collins was. He was an evil, evil bastard. I'm like, holy shit, you are just a straight up villain. He kidnaps women and he like holds them prisoner, and he's got this stuck in his mind that all these women are going to replace, the woman that he had when, back in the day. And I'm just like,
Oh, yeah.
evil fucker. You're an evil fucker. Holy shit. He just murders people. And yeah. Oh man. It's great to watch though. I mean, because, it's so cheaply shot, and it's so inexpensive, and they didn't bother to edit out any of the dialogue errors or anything like that. It's great. It's great. Every second of
Well, it
it
was
is just
live.
great.
They couldn't edit anything out. But the
Yeah.
presence that Jonathan Frid had was just amazing. He wasn't even a particularly attractive man, but he could make you feel that he was attractive when he was on screen, which is a
Well, I mean,
real talent.
he had magnetism. He had magnetism,
Yes.
and he had good personality, and he had an odd look. He had an odd look that seemed out of time or out of place in modernity. He looked like somebody. I mean, no disrespect towards the man, but he looked like somebody who came from colonial times. And so I don't know. That was, they say there's a job for every man. That was the one for him.
Yes. Yes, definitely. So what was your
Fantastic.
introduction to horror?
My introduction to horror was the Universal classics. We're talking about
Yeah.
Lugosi, and Karloff, and Chaney, Claude Rains. Realizing much later in life that Claude Rains had an equal contribution to Universal horror as much as any of the others. And so,
Yes.
watching with my family and my parents, especially my mom. My dad later came back after my mom passed away and said, I always hated movies. I just did it to do, so we could spend time together. That was something we could do together. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, I hate movies. I don't even like watching movies. He's like, but, we spend time with your mother, and then, you were around, and, we could do that. I was like, oh, all right. So that. And then a little later on, or maybe almost simultaneously, being exposed to the Hammer classics, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and Oliver Reed, and and then Hammer had the Playboy sort of thing going with the brides and the women, and these gorgeous women, that were, their tits are like hanging out everywhere, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is different, that sort of thing. And then, sort of just developing my own tastes along the way. I grew up not going to indoor theaters. I don't think I went to an indoor theater till I was like 11 or 12. 2 miles down the street from where my parents lived, there was a drive-in. So, watching Ridley Scott's Alien in 1979 was in the backseat of my parents' car, in a drive-in, where you put that speaker on, they hooked it on the inside of the window. So, all these things were happening at the same time, and horror was just the coolest thing, because I was too young to appreciate drama. A lot of the comedy that was being released at the time was a little above my head, that kind of thing, where it was R-rated comedy. My parents didn't necessarily want to watch me. They were fine watching, the alien disembowel somebody, but if it was nudity or sex, they were like, maybe it's time for you to go to sleep in the back seat, that kind of thing. So I was just getting, inundated with, sci-fi, Star Wars, and, Ridley Scott, vampires and werewolves, and and then also with the books I read. I think the first book I ever read that wasn't a children's book was Stephen King's Christine. So yeah, I mean that was my foundation for reading. It was my foundation for viewing. That was the genre that appealed to me. And then other genres come along later, but yeah, it starts with horror.
Certainly does. It certainly does.
Yeah,
For me,
yeah,
it pretty much ends there, but you've got a lot of other interests as well, like the worldwide wrestling.
yeah. That was another thing that happened simultaneously.
Mm,
I was about 5 years old. I mean, that was what we Saturday mornings were, cartoons, and then around
yeah.
noon, it was professional wrestling, and then later on, also on Saturdays, because I didn't spend the whole day in front of the TV. You're outside,
Mm,
doing things. But they also had what we called Dr. Shock, who was a local like horror host, and he would show a horror movie on Saturdays that was, from the local Philadelphia affiliate. That was fun to watch. And then we'd have things called a creature double feature. So you would get some
hmm
low budget, horror movie like Count Yorga, or something along those lines from the 70s. You weren't getting the top shelf stuff, but there was some horror in there, or Bloodmaster, some gory vampire movie. But at the same time that was happening, I was also being introduced to professional wrestling, and that's also been another lifelong love of mine. Um, I mean, culminating this past weekend, me and Eric, texting back and forth, watching 2 nights of WrestleMania. So, that isn't something that I've consistently watched, as I got older and then went away to college. I sort of fell away from it, picked up a little bit later on, for fun on Mondays, and then fell away from it again. And now coming back into it again. And I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy watching it, that kind of thing.
So, are you a fan of the Lucador films?
No,
El
it's not
Santo?
that I'm not a fan. I haven't seen them. I haven't seen them. You have been responsible for introducing me, or at least opening my mind to horror that comes
Mm.
from other parts of the world. Although here and there, I've caught bits and pieces. Um, but the direct answer to your question is I have no exposure to them.
Right, I was just wondering, it's something I'll have to get to watch myself because it does always strike me that with the theatricality of wrestling and the polarities of good and evil, that they actually do fit in very well together with the horror genre. So anyway, just a suggestion there. So I understand that like me, you have a strong aversion to dubbed horror movies. Is that right?
I have a strong aversion to dubbed anything.
Yeah.
I think if you're watching a movie, that you should be watching it in the original language as it was intended. I understand the
Yeah.
convenience. In fact, and I think we talked about this. I don't know if you're going to be, or tomorrow we're going to be discussing Takashi Miike's 13 Assassins. Um,
Mm,
and so you're welcome to join on that one. Um, you're always welcome on the show. But I talked to Bill, who you know from the show, and he's like,
yeah.
"Do I have to read?" And instantly, I knew that he meant, "Do I have to read subtitles?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Okay," But yeah, you should always. I mean,
Mm,
you should always watch a film in its original language, regardless of whether it's French. It doesn't have to be a horror film.
mm,
I could watch Amelie. I don't want to watch Amelie with English dubbing. You know, I
yeah.
lose. I'm, no, I don't want to do that. It could be, I don't want to watch a Bollywood film like they just had RRR,
Yeah.
huge, successful Bollywood. I don't want to watch that in English. You know,
Mm,
you lose the flavor. You lose
yes.
the seasoning of that's a component. The language is a huge component of the
Yeah.
story of the film itself. And if you replace that, I remember, um, I think when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was popular,
Yeah.
um, I think I accidentally rented it with English dubbing, and I was like, no, not like I popped it out immediately, and I was just like, no, get this away, get this away. So yeah, always, and I love foreign film. I love foreign film. I love to see what other
Mm.
countries are doing or what they have done. It doesn't have to be like if I'm not mistaken, I think the original Godzilla movie. The original
Yeah.
Godzilla is in Japanese. Then they did
Yes.
that American dub thing where they inserted Raymond Burr just staring blankly for like 10 minutes, so American audiences would go see it. But I mean, there's a rich history of film from all over the world, and yeah, see it the way it was intended to be shown.
Definitely. Yes, I saw the Godzilla movies Saturday morning cinema when I was a child. They'd all been dubbed into American, so uh, maybe I should dig them
Yeah,
out one day. The one I remember most was Ibira, Terror of the Deep. Something about the
I,
deep
I know
sea you
that one.
always find very disturbing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, even if we go back and talk about another one of my favorite genres of film, although it's practically extinct now, is martial arts.
Yeah.
Because now that you have
All
CGI,
right,
you
yes.
don't need martial arts anymore because you can make Keanu
Hmm.
Reeves, a Shaolin monk or something like that. But I mean, all those old films were dubbed over in English, and you just ruined them. And I remember recently watching on Tubi
Mm.
um, uh, Bruce Lee's original Fist of Fury, which was called the Chinese Connection back then, hearing it for the first time in the original Mandarin. And it's
Mm.
a completely different experience. It's a completely different experience. For the
I
better. For
find
the better.
there's an immediacy emotionally, the immediacy, authenticity that you get when the movie's subtitled, when you're hearing the original language, which completely disappears when you listen to the dubbed version. I think I don't want to be rude about people who make a living from dubbing because it's work. It's a lot of people rely on it, but they always seem to miss the emotion.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you agree with me, so chime in, but I find that American movies tend to lack emotional depth, even when they're trying for it. That I personally find, for example, Asian horror movies or Spanish language horror movies. Do you agree or disagree? Or
Are we talking strictly about the genre of horror, or are we talking about just American films
let's
in
talk
general?
generally. Let's talk generally. Yes.
I think they don't cover depth as well as some other films, like what we just covered with Personal Shopper, as a French director shot in Paris with Kristen Stewart. It's a completely different
Yeah.
experience. You would have had an American director, even a more artful director, not some
Mm,
bonehead director, making Rock'em Sock'em, kind of ghost story, jump story movies, some Blumhouse thing. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, they did this meditative sort of thing about grief, and that was one of the things because
Mm,
not all the boys on the show were 5-star about it. I think everybody gave it between 3.5 to 4 stars
mm,
um, out of 5. But they all said, the way that grief was portrayed. There are just some things that, yeah, I think American directors don't get as well. Now, I think, do we knock it out of the park when it comes to action? Yeah, we knock it out of the park when it comes to action and explosions and special effects, and
yeah.
you want big, war movies and things like this. Big Hollywood budgets. Yeah, then we can do it. Other things, yeah, not so much. I mean, even if you were to look at that recent Godzilla movie that came out of Japan, minus one, I've
Yeah.
never seen a movie that had that kind of story to it. Coming right off set 2 years after, set right after the end of World War II. I mean, it's
Mm,
just breathtaking. And, they've been making Godzilla movies for 10 years now, and even some of the better ones from the Monsterverse, no comparison for a tenth of the budget. A tenth of the budget.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yes.
America gets some things right, but some things, yeah, we're not number one in.
'Cause I think, it's a lot of it very much, I find a lot of it does depend on the mood you're in when you put something on. Sometimes I find I'm just not in the mood for anything full of deep emotions, and other times I want something a bit more than just stalking, slashing, decapitations, and monster effects. But having said that, you know, do you have a favorite horror movie?
Um, it's probably somewhere. It's a tie at this point in life between, and there are some close ones at second. Um, but absolute favorites would be a tie, probably between, Friedkin's The Exorcist, and I know that that's not,
Yep,
terribly original, but the best is the
it
best.
was at the time.
Yeah,
It was at the time. Good Lord.
and I go
That
with,
completely blew up the genre.
oh yeah, yeah, they got it perfect the first time, which is why
Mm,
everything after that has been not as good. You know,
yeah.
yeah, you get it makes the sophomore effort very, very difficult. Um, but in terms of something more recent, and I would give this a tie, maybe even um, surpassing The Exorcist, was
Yeah.
Ari Aster's Hereditary.
Right.
Hereditary. I don't know if I told you this story. I was when I was overseas, I would come home for a few weeks at a time, and
Yeah.
stay with my dad if I wasn't renting a house somewhere. And I think I was staying with him, and I couldn't sleep, and I just pulled the tablet out in the headphones, and I said, it's like midnight, 1 o'clock. I'm just going to put on a movie and see what I can dig up. And I saw this movie on Prime called Hereditary. I had never heard of it before. I had no idea what it was about. And when it was over with 2 hours later, I said that was the greatest horror movie I've ever seen in my life. The performance, the story, um,
Hmm.
the loops, the curveballs that Astor was throwing.
Yes.
I don't think he's matched that since then. I've seen his two other movies. I think the next one isn't even a horror movie. Um, holy shit.
Pretty amazed by the way it escalated towards the end when the mother
Yeah,
basically goes batshit and starts
yeah.
doing all kinds of supernatural things. I personally felt that the ending didn't work. The moment I saw the headless corpse levitating, I was kind of, that looks a bit silly to me. And also, to me, the very last scene was very anticlimactic. Is there something I'm missing? Do you think?
I think that well, for me, hold on 1 second. For
Oh,
me, what I've discovered is that um, the very best horror movies are rooted in things that have nothing to do with horror. And so
right.
The Exorcist is rooted in this child who's reeling from divorce, of a mother who has this career that makes her a little neglectful of her daughter, of this priest who's lost his faith, of this other priest who finds out in the first 5 minutes that he's going to die.
Yeah.
He gets that message pretty clearly, like this is it. It's coming.
Mm,
You get this, and it's not going to be fun. You're not going to die in your bed surrounded by loved ones. This detective who's trying to solve this murder, and so you've got these 4 or 5 other stories that are happening before you even start to get into the horror.
yes.
And so, what happened, I think, with what happened with Hereditary was you had this family that just suffered in silence. I think that family was basically
Yes.
about suffering in silence. Nobody told anybody the truth. Gabriel Byrne trying to constantly put a band aid on everything, having no coping skills, isolated, grief ridden. Before you even start to get into the supernatural element of it. So you just had this doomed
Yeah.
family. And if everybody might know somebody who lives in a family like that, whether it's because of addiction or whatever, that suffering in silence thing that
Yeah.
goes on. And so when real danger comes, they are just completely unprepared for it
Yeah.
you know They have no one to turn to. There's no Father Marin. There's no, as my one friend said, there's no Peter Cushing with a bag of sharp
Yeah.
sticks. There's nothing, and they're just doomed. But they're not doomed because of the
Yes.
supernatural. They're doomed because they've sort of been groomed for a couple of generations now to just keep everything a secret and to keep it bottled up. And then when the whammy
Mm.
comes, they're just lost. They're just lost.
But the secret is that they're part of a supernatural cult, though, isn't it? So, is
Yeah,
is maybe not the threat a supernatural one all along?
yes, but well, the secret is, of course, is that they're being groomed or targeted by a witches coven, a satanic witches coven.
Yeah.
But
Well, they're part of it, surely.
well, I don't think Tony Collette is part of it. I don't think Gabriel Byrne is part of it. I mean, they're just being
Ah, right,
targeted for their children. They're being targeted
right.
for their children. And so for generations, the mom has been isolating them. And, when you hear
Mm.
Tony Collette's story at that grief meeting, she talks about how, her brother, basically starved, psychotic depression, and, starved himself to death because, he
Yeah.
thought that someone was trying to put something in him. And she lists all these things, and you're like, holy shit, like this woman should be in like intensive therapy, and all she does
Yeah.
is just go home. All she does is just go home. So as much as it's about the supernatural, it's just about a doomed family that suffers in silence.
Right.
And that makes it more relatable, because I've had some experience with families like that, and they're just fucked. They're fucked, and they're
Yeah.
unhappy, and they don't know how to tell the truth. They don't know how. They say yes when they want to say no, and they say no when they want to say yes, and they pretend that everything's okay when it's obvious to everybody, including themselves, that it's not. And so for me, comes back to what I was saying, and that the best horror stories are rooted in something that is not supernatural,
Yeah.
in the way that like Eggers the Witch is just rooted in pride.
Yes.
They're too good for the Puritans.
Yes.
They're so Calvinist that even the Puritans kicked them out. And so it's about hubris. The witch doesn't even really do anything. They just leave them out there in the woods on their own and just watch them come apart.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a little Jenga stack, that game Jenga. You just, tap one of the blocks and just wait to see what's going to happen. So, yeah, that's the part of Hereditary that appeals to me.
Yeah.
At the of course, when things start to go completely batshit, then, that's like the icing on the cake. But, I mean, when you see what happens to the daughter, and like, everybody just pretends that, okay, well, it's over with now, and sorry about that. But you're just like, how the hell can this, nobody's trying to get any help, anything. They don't even talk
Yeah.
about it. So I hope I didn't
So
talk too.
horror is horror rather like hell is other people, would you say?
It can be. It's a little, like Sartre's thing, when you're trapped in the room with, all the three people you hate the most.
Mm.
But I mean, on the other hand, there's lots of horror out there that isn't about that. And that's the more popular stuff. The stuff with the kills and the gore and the body counts, or the sex and, these sorts of things. But the human problems make for the best stories. The human problems make for the best stories. To me.
So talking about those, you and I tend to agree on some things and disagree on others. So here's a question I've been dying to ask you for quite some time, never have. So regarding the film Talk to Me, which I think is very good, which I love, but you can't stand it. Can you tell me why?
I think part of why I don't like it, one, is because the hype. I don't know if you were exposed to this, but when this movie came out, there was just so much hype. A24 is putting out a new horror film, and it's this and it's
Yeah,
that, and it's this and it's that.
I missed most of the hype.
Okay, well, I like, I think this was, it was all over like Twitter and,
Mm.
whatever. And, I'm an A24 fan. So I was like, okay, and this was, I think somebody said it's the best movie since Hereditary. And I was like, well, that's a bold statement. Okay. Let's see if this is going to, hold up to that. And I
Mm.
went to go see it. And what I found it basically to be was just a teen kind of horror film.
Yeah,
Teens doing stupid things, to end in catastrophe. Um, it wasn't the worst movie I ever saw by any comparison, but it
yeah,
wasn't what people were constantly saying it was going to be. And
yes,
I didn't find any of the characters relatable. Not even relatable. I didn't find them likable because they were all kids. It was just a
yeah,
bunch of dumb kids. I didn't like, the main character, the girl, or the one girl with her brother who ends up, in the hospital, or any of the
yeah,
boys. They were all just. It had a couple of scenes that really went for it, like in the very beginning at the party,
yeah,
and then a couple of scenes, and then about 3 scenes in there. I'm like, wow, they really went for it there.
yeah,
But I it was vague, and I thought it was unclear as to what exactly the threat was. I didn't
yeah,
like the ending. I thought the ending was equally vague. Like, how did we end up here? And if you had just told me, hey, there's this horror movie coming out called Talk to Me, I would have been like, okay, I'll go check it out. And then,
yeah,
2.5 out of 5, this kind of thing. But if you're going to say the greatest thing since Hereditary, and then, I'm like, all right, now I'm pissed off. Like, I could have just waited for this
yes,
on. And that's a thing too. Like, I like going to the cinema, but the
yeah,
cinema's expensive. The cinema's expensive. So you have, what I do now is I have on my phone the Regal app, because Regal has a multiplex near me. So I pay $20 a month, and then every movie's free. But if I'm spending $15 at a time, and I spent
yeah.
15 for that, I'm like, yeah, that's why I was displeased. I don't even remember
Yes.
most of it, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I was just like, this is not the greatest thing since Hereditary.
All right. Well, I kind of liked the main character, and I remember, being a teenager doing stupid stuff with my friends. I also remember standing back when my friends did stupid stuff. I was always a bit nervous about things, so I often didn't join in wholeheartedly, which in retrospect is a damn good thing, I think.
Yes, I
But
think you're correct.
you know, yeah, but for me, the whole cinema experience is not a very pleasant one. I think part of it is because I'm a woman, and as a young woman, you get subject to certain unpleasant behaviour that men don't usually get. Well, unless they're possibly in a gay cinema, who knows? But so yes, I really understand what you mean also about the expense of it to go to all that. So do you think that hype is a bad thing? Has it ever been a good thing?
Um, I think that the majority of time it's overrated. The hype is
Yeah.
overrated. A perfect example, we were talking about it before we went on. The new Joker.
Oh,
That's an
yes.
Now that's an example of an exception. Um, and
Yes.
I remember when the first film came out, and I said, "Why are they doing this?" Like, we just had Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
No one's going to top that. And then I walked in that theater, and I was like, "Holy shit!" Like, smoke is coming out of my ears. It was so
Yeah.
good. And then I heard that they're going to make a sequel. I'm like, why do they need to do this? Just leave it alone. Just stop. And then I see the trailer that dropped last night, and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. And we're so starved for good stories nowadays that it looks like we're going to
Mm,
get another one. But most of the time, it's like that old saying: most of the time, it's a waste of time. But every once in a
yeah.
while, you get something that lives up. Um, yeah.
Yes. Well, whilst we were on the whole Joker theme, I just thought, couple of props I want to show. I have my very own Harley Quinn. Isn't she gorgeous?
Yes, she
And I
is.
have my very own Joker.
Very
Not
nice.
fully articulated, but I made the suit myself.
Did you really? Oh, okay. That's an evil
But
looking Joker, man. I mean, that's like the one in
oh,
Exorcist
good
3 that
Lord, yes, this is very much the Brian Bolland version, which is my favourite
okay.
version, by the way. Yeah, I mean, not. I'm a fan of Heath Ledger, but not a fan of his Joker performance. Out of the two, between Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix, who would you say was the best?
I
Or is
can't.
that a wrong question?
Yeah, I think it's a wrong question. At least for me, because they're
Yeah,
so completely different, and I just think that they're both
yeah,
excellent. Ledger is like this, anarchist.
mm,
He's just trying to throw chaos into everything. And this other story is almost, this origin story about suffering and beginning, and this man who sort of snaps. And
yes.
you were on the show that we covered when we
Oh,
talked about the
yes.
Phillips Joker. And that question, why, you read something about someone and you're like, how does a person end up that way? And this is explaining how. And I thought it was original. I thought the fact that they made the Waynes a bunch of douchebags, and
Yeah,
Alfred was kind of a douche, was just brilliant. But completely different performances for completely different purposes. But I,
yeah.
I would argue both of them are genius performances. And I don't, I'm probably you're probably more conservative with praise than I am, but I'm pretty stingy with praise. Um,
Mhm.
and I would call both of those genius level performances.
I have to differ on that one because actually, I don't know whether it's genius or not with the Heath Ledger one. It's just I felt for me, I've always got this fixed image of my mind as the Joker was very lively, very extravagant, very OTT, very camp, because I grew up with the Cesar Romero's Joker in the Batman TV show.
Sure.
So for me, the Heath Ledger Joker felt very flat. I thought, well, it's a great performance, but it's not the Joker.
Okay. Well,
Whereas
go ahead. Sorry.
oh, you go on. No, please. I want to hear.
I was going to ask. Then did that make you a fan of Nicholson's Joker?
Good God, no. Good God, no.
Okay.
Oh, don't even get me started on that.
He he,
Um,
he had
I
the
really hated that performance. I
okay.
really hated that ponderous, leaden, pompous windbag version of the Joker. Sorry. For me, Mark Hamill is my Joker,
Okay.
even though we never see his face.
Right.
But Joaquin Phoenix really gripped me. I wasn't quite sure whether I was going to like the movie. I
Same.
didn't like the Joker makeup at first. I thought this is terrible. It's not going to work. But it actually did. But I felt he captured the Joker's mercurial spirit, his insanity, but also his grace and his poise. I found the dance sequence in the men's bathrooms very beautiful, very moving. That he's coming into himself, even though it's a dark and twisted self. He's becoming himself, and he's becoming empowered. He's no longer the schmuck that gets kicked around all over the place. Um, I remember a lot of people worrying in the press that it was setting a bad precedent for young men, as if young men were going to watch this and think, oh yeah, life's a bit mean to me. I think I'll kill a lot of people, which struck me. Anything you'd like to say about that?
I, yeah. Well, I mean, sad to say that's kind of a reality now since the whole Columbine thing in the '90s.
Mm,
There were a lot of politics attached to the Joker, and those sorts of warnings that were, I think, well, clearly proved to be unwarranted. I think
yeah,
where they ended up having some violence was in one of the Disney movies or something. Like I think it was Frozen. There was something in like one of the Disney movies. Like everybody that went to the Joker, ate their popcorn and went home and said, "Wow, it was a great fucking movie."
yeah,
Then talked about it, and then there was like something, completely, not like the Joker that ended up actually creating a
mm,
violent incident. I can't remember which one. Um, But I think what really separated Phillips' Joker was the aspect of tragedy and
Yeah.
grief that he was undergoing. With his mother and these constant rejections everywhere and people just screwing him over, and that he
Mm.
was a victim. He was a victim, but
Yes.
he sort of turned it into into a homicidal survivor. Um,
Yes.
and that he did expose. Like when he talks to De Niro at the end, and that guy De
Mm.
Niro tells him not everyone is awful, and you see his face change, and I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have said that to him. And he's like, you're
Yeah.
awful. You invited me on this show just to make fun of me, which was the truth.
Mm.
There
That's
was
the
a lot
truth.
of truth in what he said, and so these grievances were real. It's completely different from Nolan's Dark Knight, though, which is, not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as in depth, although Nolan's Dark Knight might be the greatest CBM of all time. I don't even know that I consider Todd Phillips' movie a comic book movie. It's just,
Yeah.
it just happens to be about a comic book character. So we'll see what happens with the next one, and I will be there in the theater for that. So
Oh, definitely, definitely. I'm looking forward to seeing what Lady Gaga is going to do.
she
I'm,
looks interesting. She looks interesting. I'm not a fan of the
yes,
music. I'm not a fan of the music. I don't really pay her much attention at all. But she
Mhm.
looks. I heard she was good in that A Star Is Born remake. I didn't see that either.
Yeah,
But she looks. Yeah, she looks interesting, and I like the Harley character. I
yes,
like. I like Margot Robbie's Suicide Squad.
yeah.
Harley Quinn. I liked what they did in Gotham, although they didn't have the licensing to call her Harley Quinn. I thought that version was terrifying. Um,
Oh, yes. God, the craziest of them all.
yeah, and I am in the process actually of rewatching that entire thing. I'm in season 2 now.
I must do that as well. I must do that
So
as well.
it's so much fun.
Big fan of Robin Lord Taylor.
Yeah, yeah. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it now. He's in jail right now. They just put him in jail for killing that stupid billionaire that was trying to kill Bruce. He's just become friends with
Black
Nigma,
Mask.
huh?
Black Mask, wasn't it? Sionis? I'm trying to remember. It's not a character that made that much of an impression on me. But I
Well,
think it was the one known
uh,
as
Gallavander, from the Dumas Club, the with the age old grudge against Bruce. That's where I'm at right now. So he's just been
all
killed,
right.
and the Penguin's in jail, and I think Nigma's going to spring him somehow. I can't remember, but
It's definitely something worth watching again. In fact, yeah,
please
maybe
do.
I should ask Robin Lord Taylor if he wants to come on. He probably won't, but it's worth a punt.
You can,
And what Eric said here about the here's the comment. Cameron Monaghan from Gotham is my favourite interpretation of the Joker. Yes, yes. I was about to say mine too, but then hold on. Mark Hamill, Cameron, the best live action interpretation of the Joker.
fair enough. And I have
Mad as a box of frogs and willing to go to any lengths.
that animated series
Woo.
right here. It's
Yep.
really good stuff. Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah, I've always been a Scarecrow fan myself. Are there any other movies coming out recently that you're looking forward to seeing?
Um, well, I mean, they've got Joker. Um, I'm sure there are, and then now that you've put me on the spot, I can't think of any. But yeah, I've been to quite a few recently. I mean, I saw the new in terms of horror, the new Sydney Sweet, the nunsploitation movies that have been happening now, Immaculate, religious horror, and then I
Immaculate. Have
just
you
saw
seen it? You've
Immaculate.
actually
Yes, I
seen
saw.
Immaculate.
Yes, I've seen it.
Ooh, was it good?
Uh, you would probably like it.
Mm,
I just also just saw the first Omen, which was another nunsploitation movie.
yeah.
Because it happens at a convent, and the main character is a novitiate set to take her vows. The interesting thing about what's happening with religious horror nowadays, and I was making this observation the other day, is that we've become a more secular society. I think in the West, it's become a
Yes.
more secular society. And so the institutions that were once portrayed as the heroes, and in this case, I mean the church, are now the
Yes.
villains. And so there is
Yes.
no overt good guy. There's no good to counterbalance the bad. There's no good to counterbalance the evil. There is no kindly Father Marin. There is no sort of broken Father Karras. These sorts of
Yeah.
things. It's just an issue of driving the protagonist deeper and deeper into a feral state.
Yes.
And that's what's happened both with Immaculate and with the first Omen. And they weren't terrible movies. They weren't. I think I gave Immaculate I think I gave them both 4 stars, or something along those lines. 3.5, something like that. I gave Immaculate 3, and I think I gave the Omen 3.5 or 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
But there are no good guys anymore. When I saw the new Exorcist Believer, when Ellen Burstyn, sort of came back and said the reason I couldn't get into the room with Reagan back in the day during the exorcism was because of the patriarchy. And I'm just like, oh man, did you really just say that? Like really, so I think religious
The
horror
reason
is
why she
having
shouldn't be allowed in the room is because she pretty much caused the problem in the first place. Stay
yeah,
away from Reagan.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's get this kid to a foster home or something. Jesus, no, I'm just kidding. But I mean,
I'm not.
yeah,
I'm not.
yeah, religious horror is missing something nowadays, even though it's being made at a relatively low expense. Like Sydney Sweeney's
Yeah.
movie was what, $9 million for Hollywood. That's nothing, and so that's
Yeah.
gonna make some profit. That's gonna make some profit. I think. Oh, just my stupid dog. I think that the Omen was like 10 million, something like very inexpensive. David, well, not necessarily religious, but David Dashmalchian's Late Night with the Devil, $2 million.
Yeah.
That's the best of the 3.
Yeah.
If you get a
I'll
chance
have
to
to
see Late Night with the
make a
Devil,
point of seeing that if I can find it anywhere.
please do. It's
Definitely
just
go for
about to
that.
drop on. It's going to drop on Shudder in 2 weeks.
Mm. And come to
It
think
dropped.
of it, 30 coins is religious horror when you think of it, as the horror is coming from the Catholic Church itself, which is.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised there hasn't been the amount of outcry there's been about the Immaculate. I'm surprised they didn't have that kind of outrage for 30 coins. Maybe not enough people have seen it, but
Probably not enough
you've
people, but
got
I
a
mean,
good
it's just good.
you've got a
Sorry.
good point though about the absence of the good guys coming to the rescue. But if I remember right, the Omen didn't exactly have any good guys either, or the ones they had were very ineffective. They got killed off quite quickly. And the only
Yeah.
one left was a good guy, was Gregory Peck, who's about to stab his own child to death. So definitely
Well,
some shaky ground there.
it's not his child. I never thought much of
Oh,
The Omen to begin with. I never thought much of
hmm.
Donner's film. And I think it was because you made a 5-year-old the Antichrist, which is just
Yeah,
that doesn't work. And my opinion has expanded a great deal about child performances, and we've talked about so many of them over
yeah,
the course. I mean, at like episode 222 now, and we've talked so much about.
mm,
So my point of view has widened on this, but you can't make a 5-year-old the Antichrist. It's just it's ridiculous. And in my opinion, the entire Omen was just like a producer driven like Exorcist hangover. Like, hey, the
right.
devil's popular. What can we do over here? Well, let's make the Antichrist, and we need a little kid because we had Linda Blair over here. Well, let's get a 5-year-old. And have you thought this through?
He was
Have you
very
thought
convincing, actually. He had a
who
kind
was?
of malignancy to his stare that was. Thought he did a good job. But
He
so
did a good
have you
job for what
seen
he
the
did when
trailer?
he was 5. He did a job. He
Have
did
you
a good
seen
job
the
for what he.
trailer for Maxine?
Yes, not all the way through. I'm not a huge Mia Goth fan. That's another thing that's starting to come around, like
Yeah,
porn horror. like pornography horror or something like that.
Mm,
I gotta take a look at it. I'm sure when it happens, I'm going to watch it. I'm sure when it drops, I'm going to watch it. I'll see what happens. But I haven't seen the trailer all the way
yeah.
through. I know it's got the Bates Motel in there or something.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I haven't. Yeah.
I have my own theory as to the plot twist, which I think I'll keep quiet about. Anybody who follows me on Twitter can find out what that is. But as we've done an hour, and so I'm thinking of winding down now. So before I finish the podcast completely, is there anything you'd like to promote or recommend to us?
Um, well, let's see. What have I just seen? If I were my channel's there, an American Werewolf. You can find it there. I'm always covering something. I just
Yep,
did some what do you call it? I just did some reviews on Immaculate, so that's there. Not live stream,
yep,
but relevant content reviews, uploads. I did the first Omen. I did Dev Patel's newest action
yep.
thriller, Monkey Man, Kong
Hmm.
versus Godzilla, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I, if you can, go to the cinema, support the cinema. I think with the
Yeah,
strike and everything that's happened, the movie houses are kind of hurting. I just saw the second Dune
yeah,
movie. That's on its way to make maybe about 600 or 700 million. But they need butts in the seats. And unless you're one of those people that
yeah,
wants the film industry in America or all over the world to die, go to the movies. I spend $20 a month on my phone for the Regal Unlimited app, and every movie I see after that is free. So,
yeah.
I can afford to go every week because I'm only spending 53 cents for a convenience charge. Go to the movies,
Right.
go see a movie before social media. The people on social media are telling you to love a movie. The people on social media are telling you before one frame of a film has even been, recorded to
Yeah.
ban, boycott this movie. Make up your own mind. Go see the movie
Yes.
yourself. If it sucks, then guess what? You saw a shitty movie. You're going to see more in your life before,
Yeah.
your time is up. It's happened before. It's going to happen again. But you never know. You may actually enjoy it and say, hey, I don't agree with that guy. That really wasn't that bad of a
Mm,
movie. So just keep
mm.
making up your mind. Get yourself in the cinema, and catch as many movies as you can if you're a fan of movies. That's what they're there for.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much for turning up and also for giving me good advice on getting this thing going and some little technical bits and pieces here and there. To everybody who has been watching, thank you so much for showing up. And for everybody who's going to watch the recorded version, thank you so much for showing up. Wouldn't be worth doing without you. Good night, everybody.
Take care. All the best.